Hello folks, R1 here. We have a subscriber replay sent in to me by Lentokone145, and I've probably said that name completely wrong. I suspect that Lentokone is a Finnish player, and I have no idea how to pronounce that properly. For the duration of this video, I'm going to save face and simply call him Len. Len is going to fly out the P-80A, an American jet fighter armed with 650 caliber machine guns, and they're flying against the Japanese. Now in this particular match, initially I would say the advantage lies with Len's team. They have more jet fighters in play, and they should do well in this match. But as you'll see, sometimes these matches don't go exactly as planned. The enemy team has a lot of very, very good prop fighter planes, including a J-7W1, which is the pusher prop variant, heavily armed with 4 30mm cannons. And there is also an R2Y2, also armed with 4 30mm cannons, and it is an extremely good jet fighter, flown by probably the best pilot on the enemy team, Fog 060. We'll see some glimpses of Fog, and he'll play a pivotal part in this video a little later on. Now Len is a very strategic player. He gains altitude immediately and is going to take a high perch for a strategic advantage in this combat. But he's also joined by this gentleman, Yachebnik. I'm saying that wrong too, I know, and I apologize. We're going to call Yachebnik Nick from now on in this video. Nick's flying an F-80C Shooting Star, which is a slightly higher battle ranking than the P-80A that Len's flying. These two pilots, while on the same team, have dramatically different strategies involved in how they approach a match. We're going to follow the story of both of these pilots during the course of this match. Nick is pretty easy to pick out. He's got the wings with the sword prominently displayed on his aircraft, so we'll be able to tell these two rather similar looking aircraft apart. Now while Len has initially taken a high perch and is gaining altitude to convert back into energy and speed, Nick takes a different path. He doesn't gain a lot of altitude. Instead, he's looking for the end game to be won by the number of ground targets killed, as well as enemy fighters. He stays low, and he starts looking for likely targets that he can take out with his 650 caliber machine guns on the ground. So from a strategic point of view, these pilots both play a very, very different game. But when push comes to shove, you find out that they certainly know how to work together well. I'm going to call this asymmetrical teamwork. Nick comes in for his first pass on ground targets. He starts getting hammered immediately by AAA fire and makes his first pass. Both of these pilots know how to leverage the strengths of their individual aircraft, which do fly very similarly, and both know not to engage in needless turn fighting. A key to the strategy of both pilots will be boom and zoom tactics, making a pass, speeding away, gaining altitude, and coming back for another run. Now there's Fog. Fog appears to be an old hand at this. He's got the best plane in this particular match, and he's looking for targets of opportunity. He immediately used his bomb to take out a light cruiser to rack up some ground points of his own. Len has spotted a teammate in trouble, but unfortunately he's not able to intervene in time, and the first member of Len's team goes down. Nick is continuing to work the low altitude angle of this, going after ground targets, specifically after those landing craft. And if you'll notice up top, in almost as many seconds, the American team is down 3 players already. Aside from the loss of one of their AI aircraft, the Japanese team is at full strength and doing just fine. Never underestimate the Japanese in a situation like this. He's picked up a tail, and Nick's going to have to gain some altitude. He also sees a likely target. There's a Japanese bomber up high that is well within his capabilities to reach, so he's going to abandon the ground war momentarily and pick off that enemy AI target. Shinya goes down for the count. Short and sweet. Nick has picked up some altitude now, and he's going to convert that back into speed. Len is about to do the same thing. He's picked up considerable altitude and found no targets above the cloud layer. So he dives through and below the cloud layer, looking for active targets to engage. Len's going to try and put that speed and altitude to good use, flying top cover for his team. A quick glance at the score, and they are losing now. 4 versus 7. Nick keeps hammering ground targets, which is probably a good idea, but he's picked up a tail. The other team has noticed his activities, and they intend to stop it and begin to converge on his area. Len has his own problems at higher altitude. He slots in behind Man of War, who's looking to get an angle on Nick, and gets in some good hits. He's not able to put him down for the count, though, and as the more agile Japanese plane tucks in underneath him, he's going to pull range and set up for another run. As he does so, though, he spots a target of opportunity below him, and he has to capitalize on this. The American team now consists of just he and Nick, and they are facing the bulk of the original enemy team, including their best planes. While the enemy pilot is preoccupied engaging Nick, Len is able to get in behind him and critical him, narrowing the odds slightly. It's now 6 on the enemy team versus the 2 American pilots. Nick will follow through on his attack run, taking out a target of opportunity along the way. He rather desperately needed the breathing space. Things were getting awfully hot in his location. As a matter of fact, he's got another fighter on his tail already. Nick will, of course, extend and gain altitude to set up for his next attack run, while Len jockeys for position above. The plane that is the most immediate threat to Nick is the J7W1, armed with its 4 30mm cannon. Len is going to move into a position to support Nick's attack run. For 2 pilots that are playing this match very differently, their efforts are beginning to complement each other fairly well. Well, they have to. They're too outnumbered to do their own thing without any consideration for their team member. Nick manages to survive a rather risky head-on pass with the J7. Sets up again. They kind of lucked out. Enemy plane that had been damaged by a meteor that has already been shot down finally manages to crash as well, further bringing down the odds against them. They are now only 2 against 5. Nick well knows that his only advantage against this J7 is speed. He can't outturn it, and he certainly doesn't have the firepower to match it. So he gains some altitude to again convert back into speed and energy for his next run. From his perch, Len has spotted an enemy fighter attempting to interfere in the battle between Nick and the J7. He deals with the threat and moves back into a covering position. So far, Nick's duel with the J7 has been a bit of a stalemate. The J7 is very agile and is able to get out of the way of many of Nick's passes. Its pilot, Yamato Saki, is trying to either wheel around in time to get on Nick's tail before he pulls range, or draw Nick into a head-on where the 4 30mm cannon that he has in the nose of his aircraft have a distinct advantage over the 6 12.7mm machine guns in the nose of Nick's shooting star. That would be an extremely dangerous position for Nick to allow himself to be drawn into. However, Nick is undeterred. His machine guns do have a slight range advantage over the cannon, and if he times it right, he can still get a kill, even in a head-on situation. For the moment, though, the game of cat and mouse continues. The only question is, who's the cat and who's the mouse? Len has built up some serious speed and is racing back into a position to support Nick. Perhaps while the J7 is occupied, Len can nip in and pick up the kill. He'll get in position just in time to see the finale of this aerial duel. Nick times his attack perfectly and sets the J7 on fire. Len is so focused on watching the battle before him that he almost misses an incoming attack. They're still outnumbered, and they can't afford to make mistakes like that. Len's role so far in this match has been to strategically support Nick's attacks. It was unintentional, I'm sure, and that's just how the battle evolved. That's about to change. Len is presented with the perfect opportunity to engage the enemy R2-Y2, arguably the best jet in the match. He gets in a good hit, he criticals him, sets him on fire. That R2-Y2 is flown by Fog 060, who's a very good pilot, who maneuvers quickly to try and minimize the disadvantage that he's in. He will manage to get that fire out, but not before he takes damage to his right flap, impairing his superior maneuverability. Meanwhile, Nick, who has done a superb job so far this match, finds himself low on ammunition and damaged, and he heads back for a landing. Len, on the other hand, decides to go heads up with the R2-Y2, manages to get in some hits and avoid a horrible death at the hands of the 430mm cannon that fighter sports as well, buying Nick the time he needs to set down safely. Well, safety is a relative term. What Len and Nick have both noticed is that the two remaining prop Japanese fighters are both vectoring in on their friendly airfield. Len is faced with a difficult decision: try and finish off Fog, or head back to the airfield to defend Nick. He opts to defend Nick. These two may not know each other, but they are on the same team, and they're in a situation where they really need to support each other if they're going to win. This plays well to the role that Len has assigned himself throughout this entire match, providing top cover for his teammates. Fog is wisely heading back to his airfield as quickly as he can for repair and rearming. The American team catches a bit of luck in that one of the Japanese fighters is shot down by AAA, which is extremely fortunate for Nick, as he's had to jump into the reload and repair screen repeatedly to avoid intense strafing runs. Fog is so shot up it doesn't look like he may have much control left at all. And that's good, as it buys Len a little bit more time to deal with the threat over his airfield. It actually looks like Fog may crash without getting down safely. But with a nice bit of flying, he manages to set it down, come to a stop, and start his repair and reload. Len knows he has to work quickly, so he allows the head-on pass, even though the prop fighter has 4 20mm cannon at his disposal. He simply doesn't have time for anything else. Len takes damage, but he manages to set the enemy aircraft on fire, and Nick will have an excellent view of this from the runway as he cycles back into the game. That KI-84 is doomed, and friendly anti-aircraft fire is going to vector in on his plummet to the ground. They are too late though, and Len gets credit for the kill. Len is now at 3 kills, and the odds in this battle have now swung in the Americans' favor for the first time. He's going to immediately head back to look for Fog in an attempt to catch him before he can build up too much altitude and speed, and Nick is finally able to get back into the game and begin his takeoff. This has been a nice bit of teamwork, and it goes to show you that you don't have to necessarily have the same play style to complement your teammates well. Fog is back in the air, and he's gaining altitude rapidly. He knows if he can move quickly enough, his 430mm cannon can finish off Len and still have time to get back and pick off Nick as he's trying to get up into the air himself. Len's going to orient himself on Fog and vector in for the attack. This is an all or nothing situation. He's heavily damaged, but if he can take out Fog right now, he can end the match. In the end, it's a simultaneous kill. But that's alright. The Americans have won the match. Nick is still alive, and the victory goes to their team. Asymmetrical teamwork like this can work well, and it's a welcome change from the normal lack of teamwork you see in all too many matches in War Thunder. Well done, gentlemen, and thanks for the replay. I'm going to let you go for now. Until I see you again, good hunting.